Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last panel of this exciting day. It is industry and digital humanism, how to cooperate productively. And what the whole idea behind the panel is, perhaps against the backdrop of what we have been talking about today, when you have been during the day in different sessions, I think you have heard a lot of conversation about industry. The kind of industry that was talked about was mostly hyperscalers. It was mostly the monopolists from Silicon Valley that were addressed. What we did not talk about until now, and this is, I think, part of what we are up to, is that there is also other kinds of industries that are not hyperscalers, not monopolists. We have been talking a little bit during this day about sovereignty, often not about the term sovereignty, but it was the question of who has the power, who has the right, who has the access to data, to compute, and providing services. And if we are thinking about hyperscalers, and if we are thinking about ways how to navigate the digital world they have been producing for us, it might make sense to think about other forms of industries on the one hand, and it might make sense to think about if we can cooperate with other forms of industries, other industrial stakeholders and players, and especially as people from research, since I presume that many of us are from academia. That's a pertinent question. And we know that it is not always difficult to work transdisciplinary, in transdisciplinary ways. Oh my God. Because you have these different systems of trust, of norms, of values, etc., of timeliness. But we have been working in a project, or in several projects, one of which we would like to address in a short Spark talk, with industry, and we think we have developed some ways that were useful. So what we are going to do is, we are going to have a short Spark talk about these experiences of 10 minutes by Cornelia Reiter, who's a colleague of mine to the right. Then we will have short inputs by the panel, and we have representatives from different organizations, which I will introduce in due time amongst ourselves. And perhaps we'll have a second round, and then I would like to open up quickly to all of you for addressing concerns, questions, and comments, so that we can talk, perhaps if you want, in a workshop style with each other. To start off, Cornelia is a colleague of mine. My name is Biegelbauer, by the way. You will have presumed that, I guess, from what you see up there. I'm sorry. One always should start with, who am I? What am I doing here? And we are both from the Austrian Institute of Technology, where we have been working together in the framework of the AI Ethics Lab over the last 6 years. And Cornelia is is a colleague of mine, by training a sociologist. Please, Cornelia, start with the presentation.
Introduction and for showing how the microphone functions, yes. And so I'm happy and I'm very delighted to have the opportunity to begin and to start this session here. This session that is dedicated to a topic which occupied us very much in the last 2 years, or nearly 3 years, in the framework of our project FAIR-AI, and which we think is even more important in the current debate of sovereignty that has been mentioned a lot today and that we will also touch upon in our session today. It is the cooperation or the integration of bringing science and industry together, and in order to develop something like a shared vision or to implement a shared vision of responsible AI. At the beginning of our presentation, we would like to have a look at why is it so important to engage with industry and with companies. And we think that organizations and industry are very important, very influential, and also very powerful actors to shape how AI enters society. And we think that they are very influential actors when it comes to questions like who can define technological trajectories, which business models dominate, which standards become established, and which trade-offs become acceptable in practice. And we see this influential role also because industry and companies are scaling, and they are multiplying, and they are bringing AI into chains, into value change, but also into infrastructures. And then there is this typical question when it comes to science and industry cooperation that you think, how can a vision, how can a concept like responsible and trustworthy AI come into practice in organizations? This is a very important starting question, and we know a lot about that from the literature. We know from this very important work in responsible innovation, in STEER, in value-sensitive design on the design level, but also in embedded ethics. We know that ethical reflection is contextual, that it is processual. It needs multiple perspectives, and then that it needs to be anchored on decision points, and it needs trade-offs and negotiations. Yet we know that, and we knew that from the start when we were starting our FAIR-AI project, but it is something different if you are then working together with companies, with industry, and you realize that things like concepts don't enter a neutral space, but situated practices, and that you need to engage with those situated practices in order to make what you want to achieve together with industry and with companies meaningful in the logic of companies. And what did not work in the past is something like guidelines, principles, professional norms, bringing them into firms. It needs this rather dialogical formats, and that is something that we will also hear in a minute. What has worked for some firms is responsible ability as USP. And coming to the FAIR-AI project, I can't go into detail. As you see on the slide, it's quite complex, but that's good, because we bring together several areas of the development process with 7 use cases. And what does it mean, use case? These are firms and companies that work on specific AI solutions, and we in this project had the opportunity to accompany them and to really work together in this development process from different perspectives. Legal, ethical, engineering, and so on. So this is the structure of Fair AI, and what it allows us to is to learn how to approach trustworthy AI in an interdisciplinary and multi-perspective way. It allowed us to learn to stay competitive in the context of AI regulation. And it helped us to learn how to develop bleeding-edge AI solutions. And in the end, when we were looking back, we saw that one of the values and add-ons of Fair AI is that we had this close integration and interdisciplinary discussions with industry partners throughout the whole process and throughout the whole project, which offered us the possibility of continuous negotiations. It's a forth and back. And the joint exploration of challenges and how you could solve them, and also how could you integrate them into governance. It was a co-production of trustworthy AI, we could say, and a sustained collaboration and multiple learnings. What we then did specifically, Peter and I, were bringing this dialogical element that we heard before and saw in the first slide into our negotiations, into our work with the industry partners. And we did this with workshops that were multidisciplinary. That means we brought ethic experts, legal experts, technical experts. We brought them together with our industry partners, and then we were quite open in our formats and asked, what do you need? And can you describe your specific use case? And in this dialogical reflection and coming from different sides, what we saw is that we can make ethics visible in our dialogical formats. And this is an important point for us, making things visible. Why? Because what we learned in our work with the industry partners is that ethics is not always represented as ethics in what you are doing with the firms in the development process. But it's part of product decisions, risk assessments, data choices, everything like that. And you can make ethics visible and discussable. And this is something we would say, therefore you need this dialogue. And you need a space to discuss those uncertainties and trade-offs. And for us, a very important learning in this journey was that we as ethics researchers must also adapt, and we must learn to understand our concepts also from the other side, so to say, from the side of the firms. I brought this example of de-skilling here. When we had a discussion with our firm partners about de-skilling, and then we heard, why is de-skilling a problem? It's a matter of efficiency. In the first moment, we were really surprised. But then you need to start thinking about it. Yes, we really need to start thinking about it, and we need to meet each other in the middle. And who gets to decide when de-skilling becomes a problem? Yeah, and I think now it would be very interesting to hear maybe the other side, and so I hand over again to you, Peter.
Cornelia? Thank you. I should say that there was one firm partner that was saying de-skilling is not a problem for us. We had very mixed reactions in our discussions from other firm partners about this. Perhaps we just go ahead in the way that we are sitting here. The strength of that approach would be that Björn Fanta, who's the CEO of Fabersoft Research, a daughter company of Fabersoft, which is an important actor within, for example, but not exclusively, digital solutions for government, for public administration. Fabersoft was part or is part of the still running project. The question that I posed to all of the panelists to think about was basically, so what about this cooperation that we are having here between academia and science? Which ways could it work? Very broadly, I asked them to bring an idea to the table. Björn.
Yes, thank you, Peter. As mentioned, my name is Björn Fanta, and currently there are two very nice things happening. One was last week and yesterday, and one is right now. The first thing is I didn't know the presentation, so everything I prepared just went down the drain, which is good for you because I have to speak freely, okay? There is nothing I can read up. The other thing is the Anthropic. We don't have Mythic for anyone outside the US and for no one living in the US that is not a US citizen kill switch. So, and the kill switch is really the term that yesterday the EU Commission used, and explicitly Herka Rikkonen, she used that term to describe what happened during the European Sovereignty Day. And why is that good? Because this definitely points at something that we learned at Fair AI. We had a lot of thought-provoking discussions. We heard about the reskilling part and other things, but we had also the part, if we in our use case explore vibe coding, how do we approach that? Do we just use some LLM out there? What does it mean for data privacy, for source code, for security, for safety, possibly, but that's a later on discussion. It led us to the discussion how to set up the system where we are able to react in an instant to change the large language model behind our approach that is used for vibe coding at the own domain-specific language that we have. And I hope this was at least technical as I can go here for this conference. Sorry. And I'm not a technician myself. I'm a generalist. Yeah, I have had fortunately a few AI experts with me who always help me out. I'm very naive sometimes, and then they tell me, okay, wait a second, this is possible. So that being said, this brings me back to what happened. Sovereignty and digital humanism are two terms that are, from my perspective, highly correlated because they put the human in the center. Later on, because I want the other panelists to introduce them myself, I can argue why I see it that way. But we have in Fair AI developed an approach to vibe code with a DSL in a European company where we are able, if, for instance, the open source LLM that we currently use in the project environment has a license changed and is no longer usable, we can exchange it within hours, let's say 1 or 2 days. And that is really react to something the EU Commission now calls kill switch. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A pity that you have not been yesterday at the pre-conference workshop at the Federal Chancellery when we have been debating digital sovereignty and this question of being dependent on a sort of software that you've been buying into early on was a highly important topic that especially the public administration now in all states in Europe now are standing in front of as a decision what they should be doing. So, okay, thank you. Next, I would like to ask somebody who does not know Fair AI, so we can stop talking about Fair AI. Marie-Louise Lackner from the Technical University of Vienna. You have been part, I think, of the Camera Network, and now you are working since early on this year in a new position that is in which you are a vis-a-vis to industry, as seen from the Technical University, which must be a very interesting position, I guess.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and part of this panel. So maybe I can add a bit about my role. Previously, I was working as a researcher myself for 9 years approximately in the areas of discrete mathematics, AI, and combinatorial optimization. And now, since the beginning of the year, I have a newly created role at TU Wien because TU Wien and the Faculty of Informatics decided that they want to push or incentivize research collaborations with industry in the area of AI more. And I serve as a bridge between researchers at the TU and industry that is interested in collaborating in research questions. And when I think about what digital humanism needs to look like in practice and what it needs to transfer results from academia into practice, then there's one question that keeps coming back to me, and that is,
for now, right. I would like to open the panel for questions and comments and concerns from your side. 1, 2.
Thank you. I was missing a little bit more to hear about what industry leaders are playing as a role. Of course, you are an industry. Oh, thank you.
Ah, super.
You are.
Wait. Okay, that one is working.
Thank you. Yeah. So you definitely are an industry leader, but in an industry very, very close to AI. If we take other industries and production industries, financial industries, whatever, how do industry leaders perceive, do they even understand that the topic is a topic? That would be my question. And I would like to hear more about what your impressions are and where we are standing, not in terms of sovereignty. Sovereignty now is a bigger topic, but digital humanism in, let's say, average industry leader heads. How is that state?
I could only answer it for digital sovereignty because that's what I'm involved in my day-to-day basis since 10 years nearly, even if we didn't call it sovereignty in the beginning. But so my impression after the last couple of months is that if you talk to C-level, CEOs, CFOs, they understand, they want to be more sovereign. They take a very they have a very strong focus on risks and how to mitigate risks. If you go to CIOs, IT leaders, they understand there's complexity involved, there's efforts involved, and so they are standing a little bit more on the brake, I would say. So I wouldn't expect a huge, super fast change, but I think slowly but steadily, people are ready to make changes. But it also depends a little bit like what's available on the market. And
may I ask, I assume they're not approaching it from the humanism side,
no,
but from the sovereignty,
exactly.
from the US
risk, really very much strong, focused on risk.
Okay, mine is just very, very indirect, but we have a big Spanish bank in a European project where we are cooperating, and I heard a similar statement what they are saying from Commerzbank during a call about cybersecurity, and my understanding there is they see themselves as not only protecting the cash flow or the money flows for the customers around the world, but they see themselves as a trust provider to customers, even, or not only on, how to say that in English, not only for institutional customers, but for the consumer, let's put it that way, and also as an identity provider, which is, for instance, very strong in Austria. I can't speak for other European countries, but maybe it's similar, that you can just identify yourself via the specific app from your bank and just set up an A1 account and something else with that. So, so when I look at that perception, I would argue the people that I worked with at the Spanish bank, and you can look it up, it's La Caixa from Barcelona. So it's like they have this in mind because they think aside the DORA enforced risk approach and other things, and what the Spanish National Bank and the European Central Bank wants from them, they think, what is our role? And it's not only the number on an account and how to transfer that and how to safeguard that. It's really how to safeguard the people. And then I'm finished. To add to that, last year at the cybersecurity conference in France from ETSI, there was someone talking from MasterCard, and he had a very, very good keynote on identity theft. And there you learn that they do a lot to protect people. So, but this is very indirect. I can't say how they integrate digital humanism, but it has to play a role. Otherwise, you won't think about that aside from how do I earn trust and keep trust and protect trust.
Okay. Okay.
In the interest of the second person who would have liked to ask a question, I would like to take you on board.
The thing that I'm interested in more than anything is looking at how organizations can be restructured to kind of implement AI. You talked about this in the presentation a little bit. How people and organizations need to adapt to also keep this human at the center more than anything, to create a capability. I work with NGOs and mission-driven organizations to help maximize the impact. And this, I mean, counts for every organization. But you said workshops don't work and guidelines don't really work. What are the things that we can focus on when working with organizations?
I think what you just asked is also connected to the question before, because what we saw and what I wanted to highlight before is that you were asking, are they concerned about those questions? And I think it's not always in the shape of digital humanism, but they are concerned about questions like that, but sometimes they don't recognize. And we had this example in our work with startups at the factory, for example, when we were asking them, okay, what would you like to change and what is important? And then they were mentioning things and we were taking notes and say, okay, that is a principle, it's an ethics principle. And then we were asking, and do you have any other ethical concerns? No, not ethical, it's technical and it's risk, as you said before. So I think that it's not only do they see that or do they not see this? And so it's important, if you work with companies, to understand how does ethics make sense and when is it meaningful in the work with them and in their logic. And then you can implement or see the ethics that's already there and bring it maybe further.
When there's concerns about if your training data work so that the output of the model actually is helpful, you can call it bias. And this is what we, that's a highly pertinent topic when you're talking about ethics. When you talk about can you make sense of the output in some way and can you make it understandable to your customers, then we would in ethics call it explainability. It's even also, both terms are also used by technicians, but they are not always using the same term when you're talking to them about that. So in the end, many of these concerns translate very well, I think, but we have to keep talking. What we found is really if you give them the 7 principles or if you give them the whatever you have, then they are like, what should we do with that? But if you start to have a conversation, after a time you find out that many of the concerns that they are having for several reasons are very similar to what we are having when we are talking about digital humanism, to put the human in the center in the end. it's not always in the business logic to put this first. So that's one issue that is beyond, or that you can address in a dialogue. There's a longer way to go sometimes.
Just one thing about integrating AI, or actually any new technology into an organization. Something that people forget a lot, although it should be obvious: talk to the people who are going to have to work with the system. And that's ignored a lot of times. You want to make sure it's a success, then make sure the people who have to work with it, who have to work with the results, and who are going to have to be accountable for the final result, are part of the process of deciding which AI system to use, how to use it, and are part of the testing as well.
I just want to reinforce something that was said before, right? Because I know a lot of companies who have very strong purchasing requirements, and what is so important is look at the corporate values that your vendors have, right? Because those are very strongly an expression of their business ethics. And you will be very surprised how many European companies have extremely strong business ethics, right? I know companies who would not take on businesses who are not compliant to their ethics, right? And that also means that they would probably earn less, right? I just think we have forgotten, or actually don't see that anymore, right? Because in some cases it's just by nature. But that's something that we do, right? We want to do business with business partners that have the same strong business ethics that we have, right? And that's for me a true expression of digital humanism, because it's the respect that you have, and not just protecting data, but also respecting humanisms and the human nature of collaboration and that coexistence. Just wanted to also put a positive stake, right? Because a lot of discussions are very negative, because the world around us is pretty negative, right? It's pretty challenging. So just wanted to put a stake on that, right? So we can be very proud of many, many companies we have in Austria here, and also in Europe. And I'm not American, even though I sound like that.
Maybe to add something that probably sounds a bit uncommon. Now, I also think like even US companies can have like really good business ethics, even hyperscalers. Nevertheless, there are certain decisions that they need to follow if the government forces them to do things. Like if the company is forced to pull the plug on the email account of an ICC judge just because the US government doesn't agree with certain rulings, or if the company is forced to pull the plug on a bank like the Amsterdam Trade Bank that happened, then you can have good business ethics, but unfortunately you are governed by your own government, and yeah. But they also can have good business ethics, even if they're from the US.
I am from the US, but I am... no, please, God, don't applaud. But I am based in Austria and manage a publicly funded research project here. And we are always looking to work with industry. And I was drawn to this panel because there was a section of the description that said which organizational and infrastructural conditions allow AI ethics and public values to become operational. I think I've gleaned some insight into this specifically. I need to focus on mitigating risk, companies wanting to earn and keep trust. But I was wondering if you could add some more insights into these conditions that might be present, that might lead a company to want to work with researchers. Because it was mentioned earlier that the process. I think it was talking about how challenging it is to find something that is applied enough that companies will be interested, but also rich enough to be interesting for researchers. I would love to hear some more insight into this topic.
To give Marie-Louise a little bit time to think also about that, our own experience is that you have to find the sweet spot a bit. So there must be an internal reason. It's not just the money from the research promoting agency. That wouldn't be enough. There are also parts of industry that just don't work with researchers in academia because they are in fear of business secrets, to lose knowledge. They don't have to because they have a super R&D department anyway. Any kinds of reasons. Small ones, they fear the complicated procedures of research funding, especially European ones. You basically find very little SMEs in European programs, although the European Union always is making these advertisements, come please please take the money from, but it's so difficult for SMEs if you're talking to these to fulfill all these different logics and to live after them. That's a catastrophe basically. So that's much easier in Austria. The Austrian Research Promotion Agency is doing a much better job in that. To be able to create a common research project, you have to have some phase before where you try to find a common ground and find a reason to pull this off to begin with. And that is complicated for organizations that are smaller, also research organizations, and it's more easy for larger research organizations that have a track record. So that's a couple of elements in there, I would say.
I asked if this is okay. My answer to this is connected to fair AI. Some years ago, I talked to a colleague who's also working in a company like I am and working in research projects like I do, and he said, it's a curse to always work on ideas and things where you just don't know what the real idea and the question is. And this is always a constant struggle. And what I think is the best thing a research institute can do for a company is to acknowledge this struggle and give them, the company, the confidence that it is okay to not know in the beginning where the journey might lead, and that it's okay to have course corrections. And this is exactly what Alexander Schindler and Laura Bernardo from IT did so very well in Fair AI, and they are not here, so they cannot blush. But no, it's really that. At the beginning of Fair AI, we had a use case, but we had not the real, okay, how should we approach it? Because the idea was born before the open AI, wow, this is LLM stuff. So, yeah, it was, how can we do this? And there were so many course corrections, but just the feeling of this is how it is helped a lot. Yeah.
Maybe just one other thought. So what can research institutions actually bring into cooperations with industry that is beneficial? I think the chance that researchers don't have to think within a business logic is actually can be very beneficial to have this view from outside with other goals, and this is maybe also a selling point. And in terms of how to find a company, I think that is willing to work together with you on a project, speak to a lot of other people in your research institution, find out which other companies' corporations have worked out well. Yeah.
I have a question that piggybacks off of this. Having been a researcher both in academia and in industry, currently working for a Swiss company, data analytics company, previously in a cybersecurity deep fake detection company, and before that I was a musicologist. The skills transferred, but one of the things that I've come across a lot with industry research is that academic and industry research obviously are quite different. You guys mentioned the timeline, sort of the difference in values and goals. User experience research, though, has existed for a long time, right, under different names. So industry research for advocating for users or advocating for the humans at the end of a product, those roles have been largely cut and eliminated since the beginning of the last AI wave. So one of the questions that keeps coming up as I'm listening to the panel is, let's say, cheaper researchers, industry researchers that wouldn't need the budget of an academic institution. Formulating the end of my question, how do we best articulate the value of academic style research or academic research in an industry context that doesn't set off alarm bells about budgets, about timelines, about difference in research industry, research applications or interests? I'm not sure if it's fully formulated to the point, but maybe you can speak on the justifying research in the industry. I think that's my question. It's already being cut due to AI because AI can do the research for the industry. Why employ researchers at all, whether they're academic or industry researchers? Why do we need that? How do we translate our skill set to industry?
Chairman speaking all the time, oh my God. Connie and I are working for a research institution that is, it's an extra university research institution, and the whole sense of the thing is to bridge the gap.
I was actually on the fair project for a few months.
Oh, really? Okay, we have to talk. Right. So one possibility is that you take one of these research organizations on board. So the downside is we are sometimes more business-like than is academia. The pro side is we are sometimes more business-like like academia. So and that's the thing. It can be a bridge. That's one possibility. And as a social scientist, I hate the idea that they start to do the digital twins of us all for doing the surveys. This is really the worst thing that can happen, that they are scrapping all our research into surveys and opinion polls and stuff. But what they're doing right now is that they're doing digital twins of whole societies by pinpointing target groups. This is like Cambridge Analytica on steroids. This is a total catastrophe as a social scientist because you're setting us on it, because politicians are doing, in large countries, are doing opinion polls on a daily basis. Just for information, I'm a political scientist, I've been looking at that. And if they're now doing their decisions on the digital twin thing, because it's so much cheaper, then the decisions of our politicians will deteriorate because they're just looking back into past decisions, into our past data, the data that society has been creating in the last 50 years. They're not going to get anything of where are you standing now. They're extrapolating from our past through LLM usage.
I just wanted to go back to your point about collaborating on research and doing proper academic research. And I'm afraid it's like it's a chicken and egg problem. So I, as industry, and I am talking as an SME, I can't afford proper academic research unless I know that this is going to give me a USP that somebody is going to buy off me down the line. Now, most procurement don't care. If I'm selling my product and I'm saying my product is fair, nobody's going to pay more for it. I've been doing this for a while. Nobody's going to pay for it. And so if nobody pays me for this USP, I don't have the funds to go out and pay for proper academic research. I'm painting this much blacker than there are nuances. There is public funding. You will find a few companies that might pay for a special product. But in general, this is kind of the vicious cycle at least a small company is living in.
Hi. The discussion that is all this discussion about digital humanism is, in my point of view, a lot centered around the model layer. But how do you see that? I mean, there's a lot of other layers, like maybe Apple. It's maybe not a good example for digital humanism. But, for example, Apple is valued very, very highly also in terms of AI, although they don't really have a frontier model. My question would be, are there other layers, like, for example, the human authority delegation layer, something like that, because all the big tech is also in terms of agents going towards the agents as their own identity, that digital humanism also focuses on the connection between the humans and the coming agents.
We have to discuss a little bit what you're driving at with the question, because we are all a little bit offside. Could you try to come again and just blame it on the panel that is a little bit slow in the uptake at the end of the day? Excuse me, please.
Yeah, no problems. Shall I reformulate the question? Okay, so. What my question is towards is that there is a kind of layer that focuses on the authority, so the execution layer. So what actually the output, or how can we make sure that the output is what's a human authorized? So in a more deterministic kind of way, rather than having probabilistic kind of output evaluation, if that makes sense. So also, I think it goes towards the kill switch kind of notion, that it's more or less the definition of what should the output be, what should the execution or the action layer be, in a more, to define it in a deterministic kind of way, that it doesn't really matter what kind of models, the planning and everything before the execution happens, so that you have it more defined what the execution layer is.
I tried to answer this if I understood it correctly, but it is more like forwarding this question to some other institution. I was talking about this cybersecurity conference in France from ETSI, and ETSI is the European Telecommunication and Standardization Institute, and they have some mandates from the European Commission for writing standards, technical standards, and so on and so forth. And they have a technical committee called SAI, for Cyber Security for AI, and AI for Security. And there they have a mapping and an ontology for different parts that address not only how to have control over the decision on an output, but also on all the other parts. And as I said, I'm no AI expert, but all along the line from getting the data, pre-tagging, labeling the data, chunking stuff, putting it into vector databases, and so on and so forth. So my answer would be go on a research hunt for work from Etsy, because this is not behind a paywall. This is publicly available when the consensus is reached and it is published. You could also look into some publication from Sensenelic, but there you have a paywall. So yeah, advertisement for an institution where I have part of my work in, go to etsy.org and look for TC Sci, would be my answer.
I have to admit, I'm not 100% sure I understood the question, but if I understood correctly, basically you're asking about how much autonomy you should be giving to the system, and to have predefined limits on that autonomy and what you're expecting the output to be.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So do you have a kind of a bounded kind of definition of what an agent might be able to do? Whether it's, you know, transferring money, sending emails to a specific domain or something like that.
So I mean, from that point of view, first of all, you are assuming a particular technology, and so not every AI has to be agentic. But assuming it is agentic, then all the questions from digital humanism come to bear on this as well. For example, should you be using it? Understanding the level of autonomy you're ceding, actually, and the amount of decision power you are giving away should be one of the first questions you ask within a digital humanism context. But there are also frameworks, even in standards, in Etsy, also in Sensenelic, that help you ask this question as well in a fundamental rights framework and in a risk framework, risk to health, to safety, also to cybersecurity. So there are different ways to approach the question, and you have the embarrassment of the choice.
Yeah, what I want to say is maybe more an idea or an assumption than a question. So what I observe is if companies seek advice for whatever reason, they usually turn to the big consulting companies. Today I've heard that it's McKinsey's fault that everyone is in the cloud. It was mentioned in a talk. Quite true, I think. So isn't it one of your challenges to come up with an idea? So I think they are your biggest competitor. They are the competitors of maybe collaborating with academia, and to think how you can outwit the McKinseys, because as far as I can observe, if a CIO decides to go to McKinsey, it's usually safety. I've asked McKinsey, that's fine, so I did nothing wrong. And if you go to those scientists, you don't know what will happen. And yeah, I think it's a question of trust also. You trust McKinsey, but how can you establish that a company trusts academia to seek advice there? Yeah, it's just...
In different countries, you have different organizations that have that role. that have that role of being a trusted advisor. That is actually the slogan of CSIRO, the Commonwealth Science and Industry Research Organization in Australia. They are organized as an agency, actually, but they are something like a research and technology organization. And in other cases, you have other partners of government where you often have a vis-a-vis, so to speak, of a ministry, or such as in the case of AIT. So you have different organizations that would work that way, and it is my observation that in countries where you have these situations, you have less of an impact of the big companies regarding. For example, we have been writing for the Chancellery the guidelines for the digital public administration, which are used throughout the Austrian public service. And this is something that you would have in other countries, for example, as a task for a big, one of the big four or so. So it really depends also on the institutions and organizations which are set up as a vis-a-vis.
I have an ethical question, and it might be also technical question as well. I do agree that not all AI systems are LLMs, but however, all AI has to be transparent and trustworthy. But the question is, how can we evaluate if the AI system is transparent, or how can we evaluate if the system is biased? And when we are talking about bias, the next question is biased for whom, or what kind of bias, if it is data biased or human biased or algorithmic bias. So my question is, how can we evaluate all of these different aspects, or how easy it is to evaluate them?
Sorry, you played that into my court. First of all, if you wait a few more months, there will be a standard to answer all of those questions. How do I evaluate bias? Against whom is it biased? Both the technical question with what metrics and what measures, is it at the data level, is it at the model level, is it at the system level? Usually the answer is yes, 3 times. And in addition, also looking at social aspects, what is the impact of the bias, and so on and so forth. So this was a good thing of regulation. I know people tend to be against it, but AI Act did trigger work on producing standards that tell you this, and it did trigger work on also risk management standards that are looking at the impacts also on fundamental rights.
May I just add one thing? I know I talk a lot, but this is, thank you for that statement, because this is exactly what is a wonderful example where regulation and standardization brought something up. And the first draft of the AI Act had something in it like high quality data for training. Everyone was like, hey, what's high quality data? Can you explain it to me? And people had to work towards that. So this is a wonderful example.
Thanks. I just like to follow up on this. When will this new regulation come out? Sorry, not regulation, it's a new specification of metrics and about AI.
Well, we have a deadline in February of 2027. All the standards related to the AI Act have to be published by then.
Thank you. So I'm a bit critical. I'm a computer scientist, and we have this thing called underspecification. So it means basically that whatever metric you come up with, the system is going to be optimized for that given metric. And then everything else is, well, we don't know.
And it's actually impossible to optimize for everything. So it's a very tricky question, for example, what kind of fairness are we trying to optimize for? Because we have, I don't know, like 5, 6 definitions for fairness, mathematical definitions for fairness, and they are incompatible. So you cannot integrate into your model 2 different kinds of fairness model because it's incompatible. Or you cannot have one kind of fairness and privacy at the same time because you're going to lose a lot of accuracy. And so on and so on. There are other things which are mathematically incompatible. And even though that we wish we could do them, we cannot. We can do things, and actually it's really nice if we already have something instead of nothing. I agree with that. It's just, so my question is about this under specifications. What kind of fairness did we choose to optimize for?
Okay, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but there are over 21 definitions of fairness. There are more than 21 metrics, actually only in the classification area. So when you write a standard, you don't specify exactly which metric, but you define the process for how people choose more than one metric, because it's true, you cannot have, there are impossibility theorems that say you cannot have several metrics satisfied at the same time, but that assumes that you mean equality. As long as you put in a threshold, you have some flexibility. So again, the standards are there to provide the process, to make sure you have involved stakeholders in defining what you mean by fairness, to make sure that's also context dependent. So it's, yes, it's hard, it's not easy, there's a lot of work going into it. It will not be the last word that we put on this, but we have to start. Because otherwise what we have right now are systems that are unleashed on people without any investigation into how good they are and for whom they work and for whom they don't.
Yeah, and I don't buy into this it's impossible thing. I have the honors to be a little bit over 40 years now, and I've experienced so many disruptions in the digital world that is great to live in that area, to see the internet, Google, what else? And now ChatGPT, Anthropic. This is, when you look at it, this is mind-blowing. It really is, and I'm not exaggerating. So I don't believe we cannot do it from a technical perspective. 3 years ago I was told, what are you telling me? These LLMs or AI things are going to be coding? Pfft. That was 3 years ago. You know what I mean? So I don't want to be offensive, but we can't do this from a technical perspective. I'm not sure.
Some things have to be left open, simply because it's already past 6 o'clock. We have been covering on this panel, we had a wide journey. We started off with the cooperation of research and of industry, and we ended up with technical definitions of fairness, of which there is obviously a lot around. I learned. I would like to thank the panelists who have been nice and brave enough to sit here and stand to the friendly court. I would like to say thank you and to the friendly court, which was the active participants of this panel. And I hope we can continue the conversation at the reception now. Thank you very much.